we're going to draw an animal cell and then a plant cell, and we're going to compare the two. And then we're going to look at the functions of each of the cellular organelles. So we're going to start off with an animal cell. Now, one of the defining characteristics of an animal cell is the fact that it is roundish in structure. We're going to draw it nice and round. And what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to expand certain organelles. So we're going to start off with the actual nucleus in the middle. Now, the nucleus, all right, is the control center of the cell. Its job, it contains the DNA, and its job is to ensure that the cell is making whatever molecules it needs to be making, the cell is reproducing itself when it needs to, and pretty much everything else that goes in line with making sure that the cell survives day-to-day activities. Now, we're going to zoom in to one of the other main organelles on the cell, in the animal cell, and the nucleus actually is visible under the microscope, and so is the actual cell membrane. So if we look at the cell membrane here, I'm going to take a circle and I'm going to make this bigger so that we actually have a view of this membrane. Now, this membrane is nothing more than a lot of little fat molecules that make two actual layers like this. So it's kind of like two pieces of carpet that are facing one another. And these individual little molecules called lipids or fats are actually just really pushed together. There's nothing actually holding them together. They just naturally like to be next to one another. And we see that this kind of forms this bilayer or this double layer. And the cool thing about the cell membrane is that it actually has these little doorways through it. So I'm going to erase that right here, and I'm going to actually put this larger molecule going through. And this molecule actually has a pathway that only other molecules on the outside of the cell can actually make their way through to the inside of the cell. So this is your cell membrane. And both plant and animal cells have this. Now that we know what kind of holds the cell together and what's in control of the cell, let's look at some of the different organelles that are found within a cell. We're going to start off with these little kind of jelly bean looking organelles, and there's usually many of them in an actual cell, and within each of these we have these squiggly little membranes. This here is known as the mitochondria. And the mitochondria is the site of cellular respiration, which is essentially what the cell actually does to gain energy in order for it to survive and do everything it has to do from day to day. Now, the next little organelle that we have in animal cells, and we've got many of these, and notice how I'm drawing them very small, but they are numerous. These are vacuoles. And vacuoles are kind of like the water and nutrient, and we're going to call it a fluid because it is a liquid. And it's not just pure water, it's water with a variety of other little minerals and molecules inside it, but it is mostly water that is held inside these vacuoles. And in an animal cell, vacuoles are very tiny, but they are quite numerous. Then we're going to move on to a transportation system within the actual cell. Okay, and it kind of looks like a little maze or a set of roads, and this is called the endoplasmic reticulum. And the endoplasmic reticulum comes in two forms. It can either be a nice and smooth surface, or it can actually be a surface that is pitted with small little molecules all over it, small little organelles. They're the tiniest of the organelles, and these are called ribosomes. Now, the rough endoplasmic reticulum is loaded with ribosomes, and that is because ribosomes, which are also little free-floating little organelles here, and they're all over the cell. I'm just concentrating them in this little area. Ribosomes make proteins. So if you've got an endoplasmic reticulum that's got tons and tons of ribosomes stuck to it, chances are that at the rough endoplasmic reticulum, it's transporting proteins. Now we look at the endoplasmic reticulums, both smooth and rough, and those are for very quick transportation throughout the cell. It's kind of like getting in your car and going from one end of Montreal to the other is a heck of a lot faster than having to walk from one end of the island to the other. And molecules that don't need to be moved as quickly are able to go into and out of the cell, and they're able to kind of move around within the cell through the actual cytoplasm. So the cytoplasm here is all of the white that is actually, supporting all of these organelles. So the job of the cytoplasm is not only to support the organelles, but it also allows for slow transportation of molecules into and out of the actual cell through the cell membrane. So we'll just give the actual nucleus a different color here. Now, the vast majority of multicellular organisms, they have a lot of other organelles, but these are some of the main organelles within the cell that we're actually going to learn about. If we compare this to a plant cell looks very different. First and foremost, a plant cell has a different shape. So one of the main differences between a plant and an animal cell is the plant cell and the animal cell have different shapes. And the shape of a plant cell is actually secured by a very solid structure called the cell wall. And animal cells do not have this. One of the reasons they don't is because animal cells, most often animals locomote, which means they move, and their cells have to have a little bit of give in their structure. Plant cells don't necessarily locomote. They don't need to move as much. They need to be more solidly built. And just like the actual animal cell, plant cells also have a cell membrane, which is the inner of these two lines. It's the same color as the actual cell membrane in the animal cell. Now, one of the glaring differences here is the position of the nucleus and the size of the vacuoles in a plant cell. The nucleus ends up usually getting pushed off to the side. And it gets pushed off to the side mainly because of the larger, water vacuole that is filled with fluid. And we learned earlier that fluid actually helps keep the shape of the cell. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Now notice how I don't say that it is a water vacuole. It's mostly water inside the vacuole, but remember, a vacuole is a fluid-filled sac. It's got other stuff in there than water. Now, one of the other major characteristics of a plant cell, or plants in general, is that they can photosynthesize. They can photosynthesize because they've got these slightly, very similar to the actual mitochondria, but they've got these little disc-filled green organelles known as chloroplasts. And these are unique to plants or photosynthetic organisms because there are some unicellular organisms that can photosynthesize. And we know that chloroplast has chlorophyll inside it. And it's the chlorophyll that actually uses the sun's rays and the water from the earth and the carbon dioxide from the air in order to make sugar through the process of photosynthesis. And it's that sugar that actually, mitochondria uses to make energy for the actual cell. So the cell is actually able to make its own food with the help of chloroplasts. We see that there's also mitochondria in plant cells. They do the same thing. They undergo cellular respiration. Plants will photosynthesize during the day to make the most of sunlight, and then they will do a lot more cellular respiration at night, whereas they take the sugar that they made at night and make the energy that they need. Now, similar to animal cells, plant cells also have endoplasmic reticulum. They have both the smooth and the rough, just like in animal cells, where the smooth endoplasmic reticulum does not have any ribosomes, and the rough endoplasmic reticulum is loaded with ribosomes. So again, plant cells are making proteins. Okay, the vast majority of cells make different kinds of proteins to allow them to survive and do this, that, or the other. So just like in animal cells, the endoplasmic reticulum in plant cells allows for transportation of quick things. And just like in an actual plant cell and an animal cell, there is also cytoplasm. And cytoplasm is what is supporting all of these organelles. Okay? Now, one of the other things that some animal cells have that plant cells never have are the ability or are different tools that allow them to actually locomote. If this was a sperm cell, all right, it actually would not have a lot of these organelles. It would mostly have mitochondria, but some cells will have these long, protein-like tails that actually whip as a spiral, and these are called flagellum. One flagellum or two flagella. So the flagellum on an animal cell will allow for motion. Okay, it actually acts as a motor, and it spins in basically a circular fashion, and it propels the cell forward. Other types of animal cells will actually have, and cells cannot have both of these at the same time. They either have one or the other, but will have these tiny little hairs on the surface of the actual cell called cilia, which also kind of beat in a uniform motion, and they very much look like the paddlers in a dragon boat, all paddling at the same time to propel the cell forward. So if you look at these two images right now, it is kind of messy, but the same sort of things are happening here. Okay, this cell membrane over here is pretty much exactly what's happening over here. You've got the same phospholipid bilayer, the same proteins going in and out. It's the same semi-permeable membrane, which means it can allow certain things through but not others.